So, hello and welcome to another happiness class. Hope you're going to enjoy it. This week, we're talking about God. We talk about all sorts of practical things, but without God, a lot of things don't make sense. And I'm only basically explaining why logically you have to believe in God, but also why it makes a difference to your life. And then the second half, ask any questions you want. So that's why I call it a life Q&A. I do have a couple of interesting questions lined up. I've got my brother Hamid down there. He's going to be, he's my guest, but also he's free to debate. All the things I talk about on this show are based on science and logic, and hopefully it's going to be really interesting things you won't hear in other shows. So let's get going. First thing is, let's copy it in. Oops, there it is. All right. So, is believing in God unscientific? So, there's a lot of misunderstanding about this topic. So, simple probabilities tell us that God exists, e.g., for example, a single hemoglobin protein should have taken longer, I should say molecule, I'm not sure if it's a protein, but anyway, longer than the age of the universe to evolve. So, you need about, I think, about 270 million hemoglobin things. Hemoglobin are the things that make your blood red. Okay, so people think blood is simple, but it's not. It's really high tech stuff. Okay, so to make a pin drop's worth of blood, which is 270 million of these hemoglobin things, even to have one of those hemoglobin molecules is basically impossible to make within a space of the age of the universe. So if you had mutations every millionth of a second since the beginning of the universe, it would still not have be enough time to create a single hemoglobin molecules. So simple probabilities tell you that it's impossible for God not to exist. It can't have been lots of random mutations. Okay. So the second point is there's a big misunderstanding about evolution itself. Like Islam, for example, taught evolution over 1,000 years before Darwin did. Right. So Darwin did not invent evolution. It's a lot of propaganda, putting him on a banknotes in England and stuff like that to make him as if he did something special. Like all sorts of people knew about evolution long before him, right? So it's an interesting bit of propaganda, I would say there. So evolution doesn't disprove God; it just means things change over time, right? To believe things change randomly, which is the sort of atheistic view of uh, evolution, because it's not what evolution has to mean. Okay, just the fact that it happens randomly isn't logical, as nothing is made by accident. Why would there's so much order and fantastic design in everything. Why would you think that the changes are random? That's just like a bias towards not believing in God or just wanting to believe things are accidental, which is quite a leap of faith. If anything is a leap of faith, that is a leap of faith. And then the last bit is the Quran. And I talk about the Quran a lot because you can't really say the following about the Bible and other scriptures, right? Even though I do believe in the origins of all religions. Okay, the Quran, which is the guidebook for life from Islam, at least, mentions the Big Bang, for example. Okay, and has none of the scientific contradictions of the Bible. So a lot of misunderstanding. The reason why people think it's unscientific to believe in God is in part because of the contradictions or the unscientific things you hear in the Bible. Any thoughts, Hamid?
Yeah, actually, yeah. Listening to you, quite a few thoughts came. I think hopefully I can remember all of them.
Hmm.
One of them was what you said about things, coming about randomly, and I actually kind of had a different thought to that because obviously we know that science is basically what we learn from experience. That's what science is.
Yeah.
It's not a magical, mysterious thing, which I think some sort of exclusive thing to professors and people with PhDs and things like that. It's uh, small children are doing science all the time. because they're experimenting with the world and learning from it and accumulating knowledge by trying things out and getting experience. So that's and then sort of leading on to that, you were saying about things coming about from random mutations. I think that's actually the amazing thing about creation, because we know that okay, if I throw things around, they move kind of randomly, not randomly, because obviously there's an order to everything. So something will collide with this and it'll collide with that, and but that all happens for a reason because there's mechanics and things are in a certain place. But um, what I mean to say is that despite the things don't actually kind of have a mind of their own, they're just falling into whatever position they happen to fall into. But despite that being the case, life comes about out of that. And I think that is the infinite kind of knowledge that's built into God's creation, that it was there. Creation was bound to happen from the beginning of the universe when they only had particles and atoms. The not
So you
Allah,
do think
yeah,
it's random?
I think it's random but deliberate.
I think I
So,
don't think it's random. I think it's
so
just when we don't have enough knowledge to understand something, then we call it random. It's a bit silly. Like it's like just
well, I
being
mean, do you
said.
think, for example, okay, when you roll a dice, is the number random?
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's what I mean.
Yeah, but you don't make things
Yeah,
like that. So basically, if
yeah,
you're doing the equivalent, okay, for literally people don't understand how crazy it is to believe these things are random. Because if we go back to this dice thing you just mentioned, for just a single drop of blood to be made, okay, it would be the same probability, or like this is more reasonable, that you actually have let's say 100 dice and you roll them, and every single time you get a sentence, and not just a normal sentence, you
yeah,
get a
yeah,
sentence that makes a
yeah,
computer
yeah. Well, I think
program.
you misunderstood me. I think what
Yeah.
I'm
Oh,
saying is
okay. Yeah.
that the creation of God is not a bunch of dice. Is much more
Mm.
intelligent than that.
Sure. Yeah.
It's so intelligent that even though things we don't have a mind of their own, they're just kind of at one point they're a bit like a dice, but because of the mechanisms that exist in every atom and every part of the universe, and all the conditions and natural forces that exist in nature, that existed in the beginning of the universe, all the conditions were perfect for things to end up becoming life. And not it's not that everything's it's not a sequence of random events, because the initial events might have been quite random, but because of the structure of things, they couldn't have continued to be random,
Mm.
because there was inherent intelligence in the creation of God,
Mm.
so that
Sure.
one thing leads to the other, and then as you go further and further, as you take more and more steps, the structure starts to emerge in life. In
It's
the
interesting you say that.
so
So we
yeah,
know like the Big Bang, right? So the Big Bang, you might think, oh, it just popped, and it feels random. A bang feels random,
yeah,
but imagine a bang that was so precise that if it was too fast or too slow, the
yeah,
universe could not exist. So incredibly precise. It's just mind-boggling. So I
yeah,
think on the surface, some things look random, but the more we study them, the less random we realize they are.
yeah.
They and I think this is what you're kind of in a way
Yeah,
alluding
so I
to.
suppose the word random is probably misleading. What I mean is
Mm.
things are falling into place without their own intentions.
Yeah, I know what you mean
Yeah,
actually.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, it feels like
But
where
but
we feel like our choices can be random, right?
yeah,
But the more we look into how things work out, we kind of realize, as a lovely quote from one of my favorite movies, V for Vendetta, there is no Oh no, coincidence, only the illusion of coincidence. So we think things are happening randomly, but the more we look at how perfectly I call it the earth machine, like how perfectly things are being orchestrated to keep us alive. They look random, like the weather looks random, it's like wind blowing, but it's not that random because it's perfectly keeping us alive. But anyway,
Yeah, because I know this is a very classical kind of argument in the debate between theists and atheists, is that if you assume that everything just happened randomly one after the other, then it would you would never get evolution the way we've had it, because it happened in a much shorter period of time than it should have.
yeah.
But there are also a lot of work that's been gone, very interesting work that's gone on in trying to explain that, how it's happened much quicker than it seemed to you would expect.
Hmm.
And it's very interesting. There's a book about it's called "What Is Life? How chemistry becomes biology."
Hmm.
So chemistry is just chemicals without any
Yeah.
organization. Whereas
Apparently. Yeah.
biology is organized in a way that it replicates and reproduces itself and things like that.
Hmm.
So there's um, there's a tendency for the things that are going to replicate to it's a kind of a chemical version of survival of the fittest. You mentioned Darwin,
Hmm.
who's famous for that.
Hmm. Hmm.
Uh, so at a very basic chemical level, there's a bias or favor for those things, those structures to survive, which are he call it dynamic stability, which is
Cool.
like uh, it's not my field, but yeah,
I'm gonna push you. Yeah, go.
even at a chemical level, you've
Yeah.
got a kind of survival of the fittest. So basically, he kind of
Yeah.
explained why it actually could happen a much faster than you would think it would. But then
Hmm.
but that didn't really affect, that's not even relevant to the um, debate about God. Even in fact, it for me it's even more amazing that God had created the the chemical world with so much built-in intelligence that we didn't know
Yes,
that
that's
it
what
would
I was
actually end
thinking.
up evolving very quickly
Just
into
because, yeah,
yeah
just because we see a bunch of chemicals and we
yeah
think they're just there, okay, we don't understand necessarily the intelligence behind it because there's no reason why they should form, biological units that do amazing things. Basically, robots, basically biological robots. So, anyway,
mhm.
next thing, because we do try to keep it short and sharp and interesting. Next bit is what proof is there that God exists? And I'll read out my bit that you can see over there. All of humanity cannot come together to make a fly. Can you claim there is no God? Right. So we as as the general populace, we are really good at underestimating how amazing nature is. We like to pretend we think we value it, but if we were really honest, like, then we can even utter the words that God doesn't exist without feeling really almost stupid. Like, if we realize that we cannot even make a fly, not all of humanity's scientists could come together to make a fly,
Yeah,
right?
forget about making a fly. There's a verse in the Quran which mentions that even if the smallest, tiny fly
Yeah,
took a small substance from you,
yeah.
um, there's no power on earth and nothing, no one could be able to retrieve that substance from that fly.
That's true. That's true.
It's something
Okay.
along those lines. It's
There,
something like
yeah.
that. Yeah,
There's a verse of the
yeah.
Quran that says something along the. You could say that, yeah, from the idols at least. But anyway, the Quran. Second point, the Quran told us about the Big Bang before Einstein knew. So, like, that's there's a living God there. This and many scientific facts in the Quran prove God is alive. So it's not just a God that set up the natural laws and stood back and did nothing. This is a God that's involved in our lives and send messages, for example, like in the Quran, about things that we could not have known by ourselves. Okay, at that time at least. So natural, and then the last point is natural machines are constantly working to keep us alive. The water cycle, for example, and Earth's circular orbit, basically is as circular as it gets, right? Orbit around the sun, that is, that keeps us at a perfect distance from the sun, right? So just in case people don't know, like for let's think about the Earth's orbit, it's incredibly almost impossible to get a circular orbit. It's because naturally things like to go into what you call an elliptical orbit. Okay, or even being in an orbit is a really difficult thing, yeah, because basically things are flying past. And so what we have, like what we use in NASA and stuff like that, if you want a satellite to get to a far away place, we often make the trajectory so it swings round something but doesn't stay in orbit. If you want to stay in orbit like satellites around the planet, you really have to plan that well. It's not like you have to have a lot of intelligence to
Mhm.
make that thing happen. Okay. So, anyway, so we've got a couple of planets orbiting, and some of them more circular than others. And it's really good that they're all fairly circular. Otherwise, all our planets would eventually crash into each other. So, there's so many amazing things. I'm kind of digressing, right? There's so many amazing things that keep us alive. Okay, and I try to, when I'm explaining it to kids and different people who underestimate how amazing our systems are that keep us alive, the earth system I call it, right? Okay, we would appreciate more if it was worse, which is a bit of a contradiction. Like we
Mm.
should appreciate it more the more complicated and the more amazing it is, right? But imagine the clouds, the fluffy clouds we have, right? Imagine they were not so fluffy. Imagine they were rust buckets, okay? And they didn't float across glide across the sky. They were towed or pulled across by nasty, massive wheels. So they're pulled across with ropes, and there were massive wheels that took up most of the space on
Okay,
the planet. You
what
know?
do you think about this thought? Okay,
Yeah.
even if the world
But
was
do
a
you
mi-
get what I'm saying? What I'm getting at? Imagine
yes,
we could
yeah,
see
yeah,
the machine, and the
yeah,
machine was so rubbish, and
yeah,
then
yeah. I'm just saying that.
we were fed by. Yeah, go on.
Imagine if the world was a million times worse than it is right now.
Yeah,
I think. What do you think? I think we may still be praising the world like we're praising it now, and thinking that we'll still be thinking that there's so many things that are amazing about the world, even if it was a million times worse than it is now.
that's an
I think
interesting
it's
thought
because I think
experiment.
it's
Yeah,
there's
sure.
two things.
Yeah,
One thing is obviously we evolve together with the world and we're part of the world, and so our sort of appreciation of the world is part of us being part kind of we don't know anything else, so we don't know what the world could have been or what so the world we live in now that we think is so amazing might be
yeah.
trillions of times worse than some other possible
So
world.
you're saying, however rubbish it is, let me see if I can summarize. Even if it was totally rubbish, like even worse than the thing I was talking about with the rust bucket clouds, we would think that's amazing.
Because we wouldn't know if there was anything better than that.
Well, I mean, it still would be amazing if it's doing
Yeah,
something we can't do. But if it's not so amazing, if we can do it better, that's what I'm saying,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
So, okay, listen,
Mhm.
if it was I
Okay, I
mean,
see what you're saying. Okay,
do you
there
get
is
it?
a
Like, if we
certain
could make it better
yardstick
ourselves, we
there.
won't be that amazing. Yeah, we were
Yeah, I
like,
was thinking. Yeah, I was kind of like, you know, where is the how do you actually tell whether something's
I
amazing or
mean,
not?
okay,
But yeah, it's a
so
good point. Okay, if you could do something, if it's okay, you compare it with what you can do yourself. I see what you're
yeah.
saying. Okay,
But also, it is
interesting.
amazing. It's incredibly so amazing. Like the fly thing. Nature is amazing. We can't doubt it because we can't even make a fly. So, and we we're not stupid. We've been like learning stuff for thousands of years, and still we can't figure out how to make a fly. And look at a leaf. Like, people underestimate how amazing a leaf is. A leaf is it's better. It's a better solar panel than Elon Musk can make, right? Okay, because it degrades, but not only can it degrade. I was thinking about this the other day. It's got its own battery system. Like, it saves power. That's amazing, right?
Solar panel. Yeah.
It's not just a solar panel. I mean, it's amazing solar panel. And Elon Musk, by the way, is also trying to make solar panels look nice, so they kind of blend into a roof. Have you seen those, right?
No, I haven't. No.
Oh, okay. So he's making it so the tiles on a roof are solar panels,
Yeah. Okay, that's clever.
right? So they don't look horrible, right?
Mm.
So leaves, they actually look nice. We actually plant them and go, oh, that looks really nice, right?
Mm.
But not only that, the big problem with solar panels at the moment is that battery power. Battery dies, and they've got their own battery power. They've got an organic way of keeping
Mm.
that energy. It doesn't just disappear. Anyway, amazing stuff. Something to think about. Let's go into the next one. Last bit of this whole thing about God is, let me copy it. The whole discussion about God's existence almost is irrelevant, kind of almost, right? If we don't think God makes a difference to our lives, right? Um, yeah. So let me read the stuff. Do we need God to be happy? And the first point is, God creates a happiness culture that doesn't exist if you don't believe in God. Okay, so I'm going to explain that. So, religion teaches things that keep us together, right? Don't, like, for example, don't ignore people when you're passing them by. So, in Judaism, Islam, and Christianity, and in different religions, right? We've got very specific rules about this, right? You cannot just walk past somebody and just pretend they don't exist, right? You have to say certain words like "peace be upon you." Actually, all three religions have this greeting, "peace be upon you." Although in modern day Christianity, they don't practice a lot of these things anymore, right? So in Judaism, they say shalom, shalom aleichem, and we say assalamu alaikum, right? These are Arabic and Hebrew words meaning peace be upon you, right? And it's really meaningful greeting, by the way, but I won't get into it too much. So it's about really connecting, and this is so important that without religion, we just ignore each other. We don't even make eye contact here in London, right? And we feel like strangers, and we feel terrible for it. And these things are really important for happiness, as psychologists will tell you, right? Okay, and they religion also tells us things that make life easier and healthier. For example, fasting together to reset your body. So me and my brother at the moment are fasting. We're in the middle of Ramadan, and when you do things together, it's a lot more fun. You have a lot more, camaraderie, community feeling and stuff. It makes it really easy to do, and it's incredibly good for you. Okay, so at the moment, did you know this, Hamid, that more people die from eating too much than too little? Did you know that? Like,
I can believe that. Yeah.
yeah. So
Mm.
obesity is one of the biggest killers in the world because it destroys your immune system. So people, um, if you're the number one reason why you would suffer from COVID, for example, is if you're obese or overweight, even, right? Because it reduces your ability to defend against disease. So yeah. Anyway, so that's just like, there's so many things. That's just a drop in the ocean of what I just said. A happiness culture where it makes you together and live better, like know how to have a good relationship, for example, right? Not just easier, but no, whatever. Let's move on to the next thing. The next point I've got down there is, if God doesn't exist, then everything is random, okay, and therefore there's no meaning in anything, because how can there be any meaning if it's all random? Okay, and psychologists tell us that we need meaning to be happy. So this is a thing. In sort of very atheistic societies, we make fun of this idea that there is no meaning in life, or we assume there's no meaning in life, right? but they don't realize that how important psychologists tell us meaning has to be. So check out a book called Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl, a top psychologist of our time, right? And he's telling us these kind of things, but most people don't even know about it. They don't even know how important meaning is, right? Although they feel it, they really feel it in modern
Yeah, I
societies.
think some of these things is what my thoughts on that is that this is kind of a part of the scientific proof that you were talking about,
Hmm,
because we're there's guidance that's come from revelation or from the
hmm,
prophet who claim that this is revelation,
hmm,
and a lot of that guidance is proving to be beneficial in normal, material life. So not just religious, not just spiritually beneficial, but there are benefits to no ordinary life. Like you're saying that, for example, uh, that when you follow the teachings of Islam, it leads to happiness and better mental health and better social security. So many benefits that are practical benefits to material life, and they've come from the source which was claimed to be revelation. So these
hmm.
are practical scientific proofs that
Yeah.
this
So
is
that's that
there's
happiness.
truth in it. Yeah.
Yeah, that's the
Mhm.
happiness culture that I was
Mhm.
pointing out in the beginning, first paragraph down there. But the second point was slightly different. That it it gives meaning to life just by not being random. And so this idea of things being random is called nihilism, right? Okay, and another offshoot of believing in God. So these are all these things that if you don't believe in God, you'll necessarily be unhappy. And if you do believe in God, all sorts of amazing truths or realities come that bind us together. For example, oh, we're all children of God. We are all children of God, right? Because children means creations of God, right? And that's something that binds us as a community, right? And God, on top of that, says we should treat each other well.
Okay, let me just put
Yeah.
ourselves in the shoes of somebody who needs to really figure this question out.
Yeah.
So, on the one hand, there's a suggestion that
Mm,
things just came about randomly and there's no real meaning. Okay, like you're saying,
mm,
nihilism.
mm,
On the other hand, there's people who say that there's revelation and there's meaning here.
mm,
Because okay, so that person might be okay. You might when you're trying to judge between two things, you
mm,
have to be a little bit suspicious in order to kind of get the
hmm.
truth out. So
Yeah, sure.
okay, so you
You
might
have to
say okay,
question it. Yeah.
yeah, question it. So okay, you might say okay, all right, there's useful practical things in the religion, but
Mm.
maybe they just because they used their own intelligence and came up with some useful practical advice and claimed it
So
was
they, as
revelation.
in religious people, yeah,
Yeah, religious people,
sure.
prophets, or and so there's okay. This could be a suggestion. Okay, that maybe they were just quite clever and they came up with some good advice
Mm.
and claimed it was
That can be
revelation.
disproved, right?
Yeah.
Easily, right? One of my favorite ones, okay, it's a funny one, right? Circumcision, right? So, like, what kind of person would come up with that idea, circumcision, to cut your, like, why would anybody make that one up? But a, over 1,000 years later, we find out medically is good for you because it protects against sexual
Yeah,
diseases.
and
It's like
even now that
nobody can make this up.
yeah, nobody the health services don't object to it. There's
Yeah,
leaflets saying that it's beneficial,
yeah.
it's for
So
hygiene.
that
So yeah.
disproves this idea that
Mhm.
anybody could have made it up. And then, but we just spent, like, I don't know, last 10, 20 minutes before that disproving that the idea that God is
But
not
yeah,
existing is impossible, basically. But let me just
yeah,
quite say the last bit. I know
mhm.
I'm sorry interrupting, but
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
the
yeah.
the last bit is psychologists say we need nature to be happy. So it's not just the idea that God is useful. We're actually inherently connected to God, right? Okay. And so nature, we psychologists tell us we actually need nature to be happy. And so what has nature got to do with God? Like, what, nature is the creation, right? We proved that it's not an accidental creation. So it's the artwork, and the artwork always reflects the artist. No, you got Pablo Picasso and his art. There's a reflection, there's a connection between the two. And so and an easy proof that nature, or we need God, is simply think about God. Just try this experiment, and you'll find that have a lot of peace just thinking or contemplating God. So anyway, sorry about going. You want to say
Yeah.
something while I'm copy pasting the
Just a
next bit?
quick one, just my general thoughts on it
Yeah,
from a practical perspective. I think is that
yeah,
okay. We all know that we're not really here for that long. Okay, I mean,
hmm,
we're probably about average about 80 years.
hmm.
We there's so much infinite knowledge in the world to go through and figure things out. It's impossible for one person to investigate every single thing. So what you really have to do is you have to use your common sense and do what's probably right
Hmm.
and go with what seems to be right. Probably seems to be right. Um, and don't if you're interested in living a life which is based on truth, and not even that, it's not just about interested in living a life based on truth. Is that okay? It's sensible to take religious claims seriously because what if God is real? You know,
And
it,
you've been given good reason to believe. It's not
yeah,
just a random what
yeah,
if.
it's not, yeah.
Yeah.
So you should look into it and try to consider these things.
Yeah,
Uh,
so I think if I was
mm,
summarizing, if you don't mind,
yeah,
it's saying just don't be biased one way or the other. Don't believe in religion, but don't be anti-religion, because what we're talking about here is how do we navigate life, the world, right? So if we are like ideological and we literally have a wall in front of us and we pretend the wall is not in front of us, we're going to hurt ourselves. So instead of being ideological and saying something is a fact, whether we know it or not, just follow the truth. And you're going to be able to
that's
therefore navigate
actually,
the world
yeah,
better.
that's very interesting because
Yeah.
that your pure that is the best test.
Mm.
So okay, if you say I'm going to, because this is actually what the Quran teaches. Interestingly, is that just be truthful to yourself, and the reward for that will be God.
Mm.
So you and when what I mean is, how do you know that you have God? God will let you know that, and you'll be certain about it. That's what the promise is. So it's just a matter of trying it.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah.
I think I kind of missed it in the first section. The most obvious test to see if God exists is ask God, and God promises to. Yeah, so probably next time I go to that topic, I
Mm.
should add the most obvious thing:
Yeah,
ask
I mean,
God.
and there's no, you don't have to be too formal about it because you're not. Say, I'm just assuming that the person is not any belonging to any formal organized religion.
Yeah,
Just say, God, if you're there, I would like to know a bit more, you know,
yeah,
and ask God. And if you're genuine and sincere, and according to Islam, God will be sincere with you, and you deserve God's guidance. God, because
yeah.
God is fair and just. So if you're doing the best with what you know and you're sincere, then God will guide you.
That's right. And so lots of people can tell you that they've had that experience. I was an atheist for a bit, and I asked God, and I got my own weird, very weird response. Okay, which no, everybody gets a different kind of experience. So my particular one, the short version, was something like, and it was actually quite short. It was like, I in my head I said, I know you don't exist, God, right? But I'm going to give you a chance. And like in 0 seconds, I had a whole bunch of ideas in my head, which, and by the end of 0 seconds, it was like God definitely exists logically. and I couldn't disprove it. So from 1 second thinking absolutely God doesn't exist to 100% believing God must exist. So everybody has their own way of kind of
Mm.
interaction with God, right? Anyway, we've got 5 minutes. I'm going to whiz through this idea: is God good? Very important question, because we often, people struggle to believe in God because they think, oh, God must be evil. And you see a lot of movies where they make fun of God, especially this. Anyway, I'm not even going to go
Mm.
into this, but do watch The Invention of Lies, or I think it was Lying. It kind of makes fun of this idea. Basically, I will go into it now. And I'll see if I can explain everything in one go. So he basically, in that movie, they go, "Oh, did God save me from cancer?" Yes. And then after the question goes straight after that, did God also give me cancer? Yes, kind of thing, right? And then
Mm.
they kind of basically make fun of God, right? And it's a kind of, for people who don't know any other answer, that's fair enough, right? So this is why this question is really important. Okay, so is God good? Number one, if God is all powerful and kind, then everything good and bad happens to develop you into a better being. So maybe that's a bit of a complicated answer, or you have to think about it. But
Yeah, it invokes certain. It can make people angry and emotional when they hear something like that, because obviously,
mm,
if you're suffering very badly in your life, and someone says, "Oh, that's just for you to learn,"
mm,
um, if someone says it, then it's like, who are you to tell me that? Okay,
mm,
suffering immensely and
mm,
very horribly, but it's not someone, it's God.
yeah,
There's a difference, and no human being or ordinary person has a right to just trivialize something like that.
yeah,
But God is a different story. Um, it was a very sensitive and difficult topic, true,
mm,
suffering. But well, I'd say I should have noted it, but there's a podcast that I listened to.
mm,
It's like a series, and the journalists interviews people who've been through really, really horrific, terrible times in their life,
mm,
and but they've come out of it, and they tell their story through the interview of how they came out of it, and made something out of their lives. And I
yeah,
noticed that at the end of each interview, the journalist said that all of those terrible, horrible things that happened to you in your life, if you had a chance to go back and get rid of them, would you do that? And everyone always said, no, we would never do that, because those horrible things that happened to us made us who we are today.
fantastic. That is so
Yeah.
true. Yeah, that is so true.
And similarly, if you think about the most amazing aspects of humanity that come about, you, very often, almost always, they happen when in bad situations, when people's morality is put to the test. It's easy to tell the truth if there's no consequences or you're not in a difficult situation. But when you're in a difficult situation and you tell the truth, then that's when it is very commendable to tell the truth. And
Yeah,
you see the high. It's an ordinary moral becomes a high moral value.
yeah,
But these things would
cool.
never, like you say, you don't appreciate what a shadow is, what light is without shadow.
Mm, yeah,
So you have to. So life is full of contrast and ups and downs and good times and difficult things, and uh, and that's how you understand it, things, and appreciate when something is bad and appreciate when something is good.
cool. I'm gonna hurry
Okay.
up and just
Yeah.
finish off the last 2 points in a few seconds, and I can. So the second point is simply, don't overemphasize the bad things, because there's so many good things. Okay, and it's good for you to realize them, right, for your own sanity and happiness. And the last point on the bottom down there is, we make our own hell and heaven in this life. This is what psychologists, I love Jordan Peterson, he explains these things really well. It is we that are, don't start blaming God for everything, right? We are the ones who create the situations that make our lives good or better or worse. And yeah, that's it, really. Cool. So it's always short of time. We can always come
Mm.
back to these questions at some point, but yeah, these are just the basic ideas. Um, Here's another interesting question. All interesting questions. Anyway, in Islam, why do women, even widows, inherit less than men? So there's a lot of anger against religion, and I think so. This show is not just about Islam, although we're both Muslims. But the reason why I say that is because we believe in all religions. Islam teaches that we're all religions are connected. So that's a bit of a background. But anyway, in Islam, why do women, even widows, inherit less than men? So one is men in the family are expected to take care of families, right? Fathers take care of children, brothers take care of sisters. So, right, they should earn more, right? If they have more responsibilities. Okay, but then sort of a question might be why have that situation in the first place? Why do men have to take more responsibility? Why shouldn't they have equal responsibility and let men and women choose their own roles? Okay, so the reason why God doesn't give equal inheritance to men and women is to maintain a healthy relationship between the sexes so that women take care of the home. Now people are going to get really upset at this point because people have this idea that um, we should just define our own roles, right? But that underestimates how complex we are and how perfectly we fit within the natural system. So, for example, you might say, oh, people should be able to, I don't know, use two legs or one leg to go to school or wherever to work, whatever, right? Okay. But you say, I recommend, let's say, I recommend you use two legs rather than hop because you're going to really damage your legs. It's really tiring hopping all the way to work. It's the same with this, right?
Yeah.
This is a recommendation, a recommended way of life. And there's plenty of evidence that is much better for you. So there's some
Yeah,
crazy things.
this goes actually back to you mentioned about how we're struggling to even come close to make a fly.
Yeah.
So imagine how complex a human being is,
Yeah.
and not only an individual human being, but the whole society and the network of human beings and how it's all supposed to become stable
Yeah.
and work. It's extremely complex, which we're a million miles away from ever
Yeah,
understanding
and we can see
rightly.
when we leave it to our own devices, it doesn't work. We can see society breaking down all the time, families breaking down all the time.
Which is
Yeah,
why which explains and is quite reasonable for somebody to be annoyed if someone, I say I use the word someone again,
yeah,
a person
yeah,
tells them that this is what a woman's role should be and this is what a man's role should be, because that person is not qualified to say that. They don't
mm,
know. They don't have infinite knowledge
mm,
and complete understanding, so they don't have a right to make that judgment.
mm.
You see, 'cause there's a feeling that the person's making a judgment, which is a legitimate and true feeling,
Sure,
because that person doesn't know enough to make
yeah,
the judgment that they're making.
sure.
That's why it is only valid when it comes from God. That's what
Sure,
my
but
view.
also we need some facts, right? Okay, so you
Mm.
can say it's from God and whatever, but one of the points I want to make, and it's something really worth studying, and you might be shocked by women not being at home. It actually started most of the ecological crisis that we're in, and you'd be like, hang on a minute, how can something as simple as being a housewife have an effect on the environment? And those are the things we completely misunderstand or undervalue. So do check out in the description. I put all sorts of things that. So there's a TED talk. People love TED talks. And this guy did not intend to say that housewife equals ecological disaster, or lack of housewife equals ecological disaster. His talk was actually just about food. Okay, and there's a TED talk link there, right? Okay, and nobody doubts what he said, because what he does, he goes through the history, and it started from in the 1950s, women going to work in the industrial sort of marketplace, because I think working at home is work. So I don't want to undervalue that, right? So when they stopped cooking food at home, this is the beginning, they had to start buying frozen food. That's when frozen food was invented. Okay. Before that, people kind of grew their own food and had very fresh food, right? And it had a knock-on effect to basically industrializing food. And that, without getting into the history of it, spelt disaster for the environment. Basically, there's a massive knock-on effect. Do check that out. But also there's a question about psychology. There's so many areas of science that will prove that women are better off at home. And it's not an insult, because women actually enjoy working at home, being at home. There's you can do surveys and things, and as far as I know, I've been told by a woman that there was a survey done in the UK, and it doesn't surprise me at all when I talk to women, right, that they would prefer to be at home if they had the choice. Okay, but also psychologically, we're told that women women like people, and men like things. This is a psychological truth. Okay, that's why men
Yeah,
play
I
more
think
computer
it
games.
may be a little bit oversimplifying it, um,
Yeah,
because
it is over. It might be simplifying, because it's not like
because
we don't like talking to each other, but yeah.
yeah, yeah. I mean, obviously, um, yes, there are certain roles that women have been given responsibility for as in the family, and
Hmm.
men have other roles.
Hmm.
Um, so women are supposed to be specifically one of their particular things are looking after the children
Yeah,
in
and they're
terms of their
naturally
upbringing.
better at it. Yeah.
And one of the particular roles of men is that they should be earning the money and
Yeah.
or bringing the resources to
We're
the.
natural industrialists compared to women, just
But
by
at the same, but
psychology.
I
Yeah.
don't. But that doesn't necessarily mean women need to be at home all the time. Um, and we have lots of examples in Islam where women were, so for example, the wife of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam was
Peace be upon.
peace be
Yeah.
upon him was she was a business lady and she used to travel and trade everywhere. Um, and I think there's also benefits of women, working and studying, and not just benefits. Islam teaches that women should educate, be educated,
Yeah, but that's
and
different
yeah,
to going out and doing a job. I think
yeah,
there's space for working outside, right? If you're, I would say, bored or something, right? But the is what I'm talking about is the balance, and the balance is completely wrong in somehow valuing some sort of career, okay, which is a pipe dream for a lot of people, because most people do jobs they hate, right? It's just statistically true, right? Okay, so it's kind of overvaluing this idea that if you have a job or a career, then you're going to be really happy. That's paradise. Okay, that is not paradise. Having to do a job, why would doing a job be paradise? Okay, um and so that's kind of one point. But uh yeah, go on. What were you going to say? So
I
I
mean,
think it's
yeah,
overvalued. That's what I'm
I mean,
saying, really.
we like our spiritual head of our community, Azur, very
Hmm.
often, encourages ladies to advance in their professions and become the top in their fields. So it's not a that's not a
I'm not sure
something
how
which is
often that happens. I think in
yeah, it's
niche
very
situation.
yeah,
Not.
it's not very unique in lot with all the lot those question answer sessions
Hmm.
and people ask advice and there's there's separate organizations for uh, the ladies who are
Hmm. I'll
There's
question that. I'll question that. But anyway, because I do listen to those as well. But anyway, uh,
what's your thought on
I
that?
would say that's kind of plan B, is what I'd say, right? So yes, women can do certain things really well, especially like the memorizing and language and things like that. Brains are different, right? Um, and but the value of the family is paramount and incredibly important and should not be undervalued because you destroy society
Yeah,
if you
yeah. In terms of
value them up.
priority, yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
So yeah, there's lots of things you can do. Lots of things
yeah,
in life, but
yeah,
everything in life has a, a rank and a priority.
yeah. That's right.
I see what you're saying. So yes, to
It
go
comes
as
much,
far as you,
much, much
yeah,
lower. I would
yeah,
say. I would say
yeah. So you
compared
shouldn't be
to
it shouldn't be
yeah,
sacrificing the upbringing of
yeah.
children
Yeah, and the word I
for
think
yeah,
the word the since we're pointing out Islam, the
yeah.
question was asking about Islam. It's worth saying this is incredibly important, and the text is gone from the bottom. But anyway, it's worth saying that Islam gave rights to women for inheritance, for example, and we're talking about inheritance uh, over 1,000 years, 1,500 years before people in the UK were given those same rights. It was like 1926 or something. They had the same rights that Islam gave. So there's no point looking down at Islam when it's so far ahead. And yeah. Yep. And last, I think we're on the last bit. Are we
Yeah.
on the
So there
last
was a
one?
question
Yeah.
about inheritance
Yeah.
there on your screen. I don't think we even talked about it.
Yeah, that was the we. What were you talking about? Why? Yeah, yeah, yeah. It
Yeah.
came. Yeah, I mean that's what we were talking about. Now
Okay.
we're on the last one. Yeah,
But
yeah.
yeah. Okay.
So but that's why we were talking about the
Yeah.
roles of men and women. But anyway,
Okay.
yeah, I know we're going
But
through
yeah, but
this
that
on a
was
slow
the
path.
question was actually wrong as well because women don't inherit less when you look at, for example, if it's it was mentioned about a widow, the woman inherits her husband's wealth who passes away.
Ah,
So so there's a bit of a misunderstanding in that question as well.
cool. See, I'm always learning. Okay, yeah, I do put these facts, put these things together. Never knew that one. That's really interesting. So I just assumed that basically the brother would be responsible. So basically, they get taken care of left, right, and center.
Yeah,
And
the
if they're
children and the wife. Yeah.
yeah, and even if they're the only people, that they get everything anyway. There's lots of
Yeah,
conditions. It's actually very complicated, but they're basically taken care of is the main thing.
there's a whole network of inheritance described it in the Quran,
Yeah.
and yeah,
Cool. And the last one is faith, the opposite of science. So, me and my brother been disagreeing on this, so it could be very interesting. And disagreement is interesting and useful. Uh, Number one, my first point is faith should be based on science and logic. Otherwise, it will lead you to believe in ridiculous things. I'll just whiz through this really quickly. Faith also means not knowing how you will be rewarded for your action. So basically, there's what faith is, but now the second point is what's the value of faith? Like
yeah. So I
faith
think
is,
there's a contradiction here because,
yeah,
for example, the first one
yeah,
is so based on science and logic. This is human science and logic
yeah,
that we're talking about.
yeah,
Okay, and otherwise you could lead to believing some ridiculous things.
mm,
So, for example, one could argue about your opinions about the roles of men and women.
mm.
They say, okay, our scientific conclusion is different to your religious conclusion. So maybe
Yeah.
that,
Then I
so
would
that
change my
maybe,
mind. Then I would change my mind. If there was scientific evidence that disproved my scientific evidence, then I'd change my mind. That's it.
okay, fair enough. Yeah.
Yeah, but what my second point was about the value of faith. So faith is after knowing something makes sense, but you don't know how you're going to be rewarded or when you're going to be rewarded. You just know it makes sense to do the thing, right? So that makes that's really important because otherwise doing a good deed become like a transaction. Like if you knew that if I did a good deed today, tomorrow I'm going to get £5 for it, that just becomes part of materialism. So faith is when you don't know how the good deed is going to be paid back or if or when or whatever. You just know that it's a good deed. So you do, for example, I might do a good deed. I might be nice to my brother Hamid, right? But I don't know if he's going to be nice back to me. But I know in the big picture of things, logically, it makes sense to be good to people because then, people being good to each other makes the world a better place. But I don't know how I'm going to get paid back for it. But I know it's better for the world. Let's say so. That's what the value of faith is, right? And then the last point is there are times when you cannot test the truth, like you don't know enough, right? You're not scientific enough, for example. Okay, um, in which case, the person who told you the truth should have a good track record in that particular area, right? So, me and my brother were talking about our spiritual leader, and sometimes I would listen to something, and sometimes I wouldn't. Okay, and that spiritual leader is not a scientist. Well, we're all scientists to some extent, right? But that's not like his. He might talk about. He might give advice best as he can about certain spirit scientific thing, but he could be wrong, right? And the Prophet of Islam also said, like, he gave some sort of advice about horticulture or agriculture, and he said, and then afterwards it went wrong, and he said, "Don't listen to me if you know better." Right, because this is not my speciality.
Oh, you could still slip
Religion is
up
my
here because
specialty.
our spiritual leader
Yeah,
was actually an expert in that agriculture. So
yeah, no. So wait,
yeah,
so I was talking about two
yeah,
different examples.
okay,
I was
yeah,
talking
yeah,
about Prophet of Islam. He gave some agricultural advice
yeah.
about how to. But you're right. But the other thing that I was talking about, our current spiritual leader, he is very good with farming. So people are good at different things. It's true. That's a good point. Okay, but he gave some advice, very like niche advice about vitamin D getting it through a window, which you can't, right? But 99.99% of the stuff I'm learning is from him as well. So it's good to balance that point of view. Like, just be aware that some things can be wrong because people are human. They can say things that are wrong, which are maybe slightly outside their specialism. That's all. It happens. So what's your point of view?
Yeah. So, what's the question? I'm not sure what's
So,
the.
I mean, do you disagree with any of it? What I said? Like, should faith be based on science and logic
Okay, so
as much as you know?
what's the role of what's where does okay? So it seems like your own scientific research
Hmm.
is sufficient. Yeah.
As
So
best as you know, yeah, that's
so
fair enough.
where does religion come into it then?
So, okay, so one of the big things that atheists makes fun of religious people is that religious, they claim that religious people have something called faith, which is not based on science. So, for example, a lot of Christians would believe that the universe was created in 6 days, and that's against commonly understood science, but that's their faith, right? And I'm saying that is an incorrect understanding of faith because if you go to the dictionary, if you Google the meaning of the word faith, they will tell you it's something that's not really
Okay,
based on
so I see where
fact.
you're coming. Yeah, so we're
Yeah.
saying you
So this is an important topic in that sense, is what
there's
I'm
lots of
talking about.
different versions of what faith is from different
Yeah.
people, and so
Mm.
you need something independent to be able to check that,
Yeah,
which
so
is
I'm
science.
saying,
Yeah.
yeah. So I think a lot of people misunderstand this. Religious people, as well as atheists, misunderstand this topic. Okay, what is faith? Does faith mean just believe something when you don't even know
If
or
you,
have a
if
good
you,
reason for
I
it?
see. Okay, I understand what you're saying. If you just go completely, you know, yeah, fully lean on religious teachings without even thinking, then history has proven that religious teachings can lead you astray as well, because there's different versions and some
Well,
versions are
if they
right.
get corrupted, in my opinion. But
Yeah,
yeah,
if they
yeah,
get
yeah,
corrupted, and you can get so some people, religious people, will go down one path, and some will go down another path, and which one's right, which one's wrong. And the only way you can check is by stepping away outside of that and using your common sense, as we talked about, and you know the best science that you can make use of to make the right decision.
yeah. And it's not even
Uh,
necessarily religious situations. The reason why Hitler was able to control so many people is because he told them, this is the truth, don't question it. And people didn't question it, and they killed their neighbors and all sorts of people just because they were told that. And so this is a weakness in psychology, human psychology. They've tested it so many times. Like, you forget even religion. There's a really famous experiment that's all pretty much all psychologists will know. It's called Milgram's experiment. And basically, just by somebody wearing a white lab coat telling you this is what you should do, and effectively in this experiment the person was try, told to kill somebody else, and they did it. So they don't question. You have to think for yourself, question, make sure what you're saying makes sense, is what I'm saying. Don't just follow orders. Be careful with that.
yeah, but then there's a practical side of it as well. You see, so if you're part of an organization,
Hmm.
every organization has a structure and has it and relies on people, complying with instructions, whether
Yeah,
they
so that's
agree
the
with them.
danger. So Hitler had an organization, right? Because if you start saying my organization is perfect, that's a circular argument. So you
Well,
can't
I haven't
assume.
said that, but I just said
But
that
but
for
but
yeah.
yeah. So Hitler had this is exactly the what I'm talking about. Hitler had an organization, and people said, we need unity, we need all this kind of stuff. Just listen, and then we saw the result, right? So it's really dangerous. So you have to think for yourself, and don't be part of the organization if it's doing something wrong. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah,
Just
no,
step
I'm just
away.
saying
Yeah.
we're always part of one organization or another.
Yeah, but we gotta choose
So
to. We have to opt to not be part of that organization
yeah,
at
but you're
times.
yeah no, I think you've oversimplified things because you can't have any organization without some structure and obedience.
I think you
Uh,
can. You can
no,
always
you're just
give me one example, because I think you're oversimplifying. Give
yeah.
me one
Okay,
example where you have to be in an army, for example. Yeah, let's say in an army, right?
no, army is an extreme example. Any
Sure.
ordinary civilian organization,
Okay, so tell me,
a
like
business or a company.
your job, yeah,
Yeah,
your
say
job.
yeah,
If
my
your
job. Yeah.
job told you to, in your part of your job, smack kids around, you wouldn't do it, would you? You would say, "I quit," right?
Yeah, that's
Or
true.
you would
Yeah,
step
yeah.
back. So every single situation, that you cut, I think you're simplifying it. The simple thing is, you have to, as an individual, always choose between right and wrong, because you are accountable even to yourself. You won't even like yourself if you aren't 100% accountable for doing the right thing every single time.
Yeah,
That's,
you have to be comfortable in yourself about what you're doing. Yeah, that's true.
anyway, that was a good
Yeah,
discussion, because what you're saying, a lot of people think, and I think, and at the end, the viewers decide what they think, really, and it's just exposing them to different ideas is what's important. So thank you very much,
all
Hamid.
right.
Me and Hamid, we both haven't eaten all day, so I'm going to let you run away. We're both going to prepare something to eat. So, Jazakallah, really appreciate it. Thank you, Hamid, for taking
Okay,
time
peace
to
be
do this.
upon you.
Peace be upon you. Thank you, everybody, for watching. Please press the like button. Blah blah blah. Join me next week for another interesting conversation. Bye.